Once they were the faces everyone recognized, glamorous, powerful, and seemingly untouched by time. But illness, addiction, cosmetic procedures, and decades of pressure changed some of Hollywood's biggest stars beyond what fans expected. Stay to see the most shocking transformations and subscribe to Hollywood Legends Remembered for more unforgettable stories. Tim Curry. Dr. Frankenfurter in the Rocky Horror Picture Show made Tim Curry a cult icon. His powerful voice, theatrical confidence, and unpredictable energy later carried into Clue, It, Annie, and Home Alone 2. He could dominate a scene through movement, expression, and the sound of a single line. That changed in July 2012 when Curry suffered a major stroke. He required emergency treatment and was left with lasting paralysis. The actor, who had once moved across stages with complete control, could no longer walk and had to use a wheelchair. His speech was also badly affected, forcing him to learn how to communicate clearly again. What happens when an actor loses control of the voice and movement that built his career? Curry did not return to the physically demanding performances that had defined him. Instead, he adapted. Voice acting allowed him to continue working without hiding the damage caused by the stroke. He also attended conventions, participated in special events, and appeared in a televised version of the Rocky Horror Picture Show as the criminologist. In 2025, Curry spoke openly about the severity of his condition. He confirmed that he still could not walk and described the fear of realizing something was seriously wrong during the stroke. His speech remained slower and required effort, but his humor and memory of his career were still clearly present. Tim Curry is living with permanent physical limitations, not simply recovering from a temporary illness. The stroke took away much of his independence, but it did not erase the personality that made him unforgettable. Neil Diamond. For more than 5 decades, Neil Diamond stood in front of packed arenas performing songs such as Sweet Caroline, Cracklin' Rosie, and Song Sung Blue. His deep voice and direct connection with audiences made him one of America's most successful singer-songwriters. Then, in 2018, doctors gave him news that ended the life he knew on the road. Diamond had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a progressive neurological condition that affects movement balance and coordination. Following medical advice, he canceled the remaining dates of his 50th anniversary tour and announced that he would no longer tour. For a performer who had spent most of his adult life on stage, the decision was a major personal loss. What happens when the body can no longer keep pace with the music that built your life? Diamond later admitted that he resisted accepting the diagnosis for the first few years. Parkinson's forced him to give up the demanding travel schedule, rehearsals, and full concerts that had defined his career. However, he continued writing and remained involved with projects based on his music. The Broadway production, A Beautiful Noise, brought his story back before audiences. Diamond made several rare appearances connected to the musical and occasionally joined crowds in singing his best-known song. In 2025, at 84, he appeared at a benefit event and performed again. Neil Diamond is living with a disease that does not have a cure and may continue to limit his independence. Touring is over, but his voice, humor, and connection with fans have not completely disappeared. Linda Ronstadt. Linda Ronstadt knew something was wrong when the voice that had carried Blue Bayou, You're No Good, and When Will I Be Loved stopped obeying her. She had spent decades moving effortlessly between rock, country, pop, Broadway, and traditional Mexican music. Then singing the ability that defined her life became physically impossible. Ronstadt initially believed she had Parkinson's disease and publicly discussed that diagnosis in 2013. Doctors later determined that she was living with progressive supranuclear palsy, or PSPA, rare degenerative brain disorder that can affect balance, movement, speech, swallowing, and eye control. Standard Parkinson's medications did not help her. What does a singer do when the one instrument she can never replace is taken away? The loss was not only professional. Ronstadt could no longer perform record normally or even sing casually at home. She has described being able to hear music clearly in her mind while lacking the physical control to produce it. Her mobility also became limited, forcing her to spend much more time at home and depend on others for activities that had once been simple. She did not attempt a false comeback. Instead, Ronstadt accepted that her performing career was over and turned toward memoirs, documentaries, interviews, and preserving the musical traditions that shaped her. Her recordings continue to reach new listeners even as the disease steadily restricts her daily life. Linda Ronstadt is not confirmed to be near death, but PSP is progressive and has no cure. It ended one of America's greatest singing careers by taking away the variability that made her famous. Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox was at the height of his career when a small tremor in one finger began changing everything. He was known worldwide as Marty McFly in the Back to the Future trilogy and Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties. In 1991, at only 29, doctors diagnosed him with young-onset Parkinson's disease. Fox kept the diagnosis private for 7 years. He continued acting while trying to hide the shaking and stiffness from cameras, sometimes positioning objects or adjusting his movements to conceal the symptoms. In 1998, he finally told the public. 2 years later, he stepped away from his regular role on Spin City and created the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. How do you continue performing when every movement requires concentration? The disease has become much harder to manage. Fox has suffered repeated falls and serious injuries, including broken bones and a shoulder replacement. Walking can be dangerous, and he increasingly relies on assistance. His speech and facial control have also changed, making acting more difficult than it once was. Fox officially retired from acting in 2020, but he continued writing, fundraising, and discussing the reality of Parkinson's without pretending it was easy. The documentary, Still a Michael J. Fox Movie, showed the physical effort behind even ordinary movements. In 2026, he returned for a guest role in Shrinking, playing a man living with Parkinson's. Michael J. Fox is facing a progressive disease with no cure. It has taken away much of his physical independence, but it has not stopped him from turning his condition into one of the world's most influential campaigns for medical research. Wendy Williams. In 2021, Wendy Williams began missing episodes of The Wendy Williams Show as her health problems became increasingly difficult to hide. She had already disclosed Graves' disease and lymphedema, but viewers also noticed changes in her speech behavior, memory, and ability to remain on camera. By 2022, her long-running talk show had ended without her returning to the host's chair. The situation became more serious when Williams was placed under a court-appointed financial guardianship. In 2024, her medical team announced that she had been diagnosed with primary progressive aphasia and frontotemporal dementia. Both conditions can affect language judgment, personality, and the ability to handle daily decisions. Is Wendy receiving the protection she needs, or has the guardianship taken away too much of her freedom? Williams has publicly challenged the claim that she is mentally incapable. During interviews and rare appearances, she has insisted that she understands what is happening and wants control of her finances and living arrangements returned. Her family has also questioned the level of access they have been given to her. The contrast is difficult to ignore. Wendy once controlled a nationally syndicated program built around her voice and opinions. Today, doctors, attorneys, and a legal guardian have enormous influence over where she lives, whom she sees, and how her money is managed. Her exact condition remains surrounded by disagreement, but the larger reality is clear. Serious illness and legal restrictions have ended her television career and left one of daytime television's most independent personalities fighting to be heard in decisions about her own life. Bruce Willis. In March 2022, Bruce Willis's family announced that he was retiring from acting because aphasia was affecting his ability to communicate. The news explained why the star of Die Hard, moonlighting Pulp Fiction, and The Sixth Sense had recently appeared in a rapid series of smaller films, sometimes struggling to remember lines or follow directions on set. Less than a year later, his family revealed that the condition had progressed into frontotemporal dementia, or FTD. This incurable neurological disease damages areas of the brain responsible for language, personality, judgment, and behavior. Communication problems were only one part of what Willis and those caring for him were facing. How much of the man audiences remember remains when language and independence begin slipping away. Willis has not returned to acting. His wife, Emma Hemming Willis, and his extended family have shared occasional updates while trying to protect his privacy. As his needs increased, he was moved into a nearby one-story residence designed to provide a calmer environment and full-time professional support. His family continues to visit regularly. Recent comments from Emma also corrected claims that Bruce had forgotten everyone around him. She explained that he still recognizes loved ones and retains important memories, even though the disease continues affecting other parts of his brain. Bruce Willis is not publicly confirmed to be near death, but FTD is progressive and currently has no cure. It has already ended his career, reduced his independence, and changed how he connects with the people closest to him. The action hero who once survived everything on screen is now facing a battle no script can control. Chad Gilbert. During a Newfound Glory performance in February 2026, Chad Gilbert began losing control of his left hand. His left leg weakened, he started falling, and a hospital scan revealed 3 tumors in his brain. 4 days later, the 45-year-old guitarist underwent emergency surgery. Gilbert's cancer battle had already lasted nearly 5 years. In 2021, doctors discovered a massive tumor on his adrenal gland. He underwent major surgery, but the disease later appeared in his spine, lungs, and stomach. Doctors initially classified it as metastatic pheochromocytoma. After the brain tumors were found, the diagnosis was revised to stage 4 adrenocortical carcinoma, a rare and aggressive cancer arising from the adrenal cortex. How does a musician continue when cancer begins taking away the hands and legs he needs on stage? Surgery removed the largest brain tumor, while radiation targeted smaller areas that could not be safely removed. Gilbert regained control of his left hand almost immediately, but recovery required physical therapy, continued treatment, and assistance with movement. His doctors made no promise that the danger had passed. Still, Gilbert set one goal to play with Newfound Glory again in Nashville. In June 2026, he returned to the stage using a motorized scooter and performed Hit or Miss and My Friends Over You. His wife and 4-year-old daughter watched from the audience. Chad Gilbert remains seriously ill. The cancer is advanced, treatment is ongoing, and his future is uncertain. Yet his return was not presented as a cure. It was one night reclaimed from a disease that has already taken years of surgeries, radiation strength, and independence. Teddi Mellencamp. Severe headaches sent Teddi Mellencamp to the hospital in February 2025. She expected doctors to find migraines, but brain scans revealed several tumors, including some described as being about the size of plums. Emergency surgery followed, and 4 tumors were removed. The diagnosis was connected to melanoma first discovered on her skin in 2022. Mellencamp had already undergone numerous procedures to remove suspicious areas from her body. Further testing showed that the cancer had spread to her brain and lungs, placing it at stage 4. She then began radiation and immunotherapy while recovering from major brain surgery. How do you prepare your children for a future that doctors cannot clearly predict? Treatment affected nearly every part of her daily life. Mellencamp experienced fatigue, hair loss, weight changes, and long periods when she could not maintain her normal routine. She also spoke about the fear of missing time with her 3 children and the anxiety that returned before every new scan. By late 2025, doctors could no longer detect active cancer in her scans. The news was encouraging, but treatment continued because metastatic melanoma can return even when tumors are no longer visible. In 2026, she remained on immunotherapy and under close medical supervision while waiting for further test results. Another medical emergency arrived when she developed Stevens-Johnson syndrome after reacting to medication. She recovered, but the experience added another difficult chapter to an already exhausting battle. Teddi Mellencamp's recent progress has given her family real hope. Still, stage 4 melanoma brain surgery, continued treatment, and the possibility of recurrence mean that her health remains uncertain. Christina Applegate. The final season of Dead to Me had to be rebuilt around Christina Applegate's health. During production in 2021, numbness, weakness, and difficulty walking led to a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. Filming stopped for months, and when it resumed, she often needed a wheelchair, a cane, shorter workdays, and help standing for scenes. Applegate had already survived breast cancer, but she has described MS as a far more relentless opponent. The disease attacks the central nervous system, disrupting communication between the brain and body. For her, that has meant severe pain, exhaustion, numb feet, limited movement, and days when leaving bed feels impossible. How do you keep performing when even crossing a room requires planning? She completed Dead to Me, but the effort convinced her that regular on-camera acting might no longer be realistic. Public appearances became rare. At the 2023 Screen Actors Guild Awards, she walked with a cane bearing the words FUMS, making no attempt to hide what the disease had taken. By 2026, Applegate said she spent much of her time in bed and left home only when necessary. Even driving her daughter to school had become an important routine that required her to return home and rest immediately. A recent hospitalization caused concern, although she later said she was growing stronger. Applegate now co-hosts the Messy podcast with Jamie Lynn Sigler and has written openly about pain, anger, and loss. She does not describe MS as a gift. She presents it as a lifelong disease that has changed her career independence and ordinary daily life. Céline Dion. On July 26, 2024, Céline Dion stood beneath the Eiffel Tower and sang Hymne à l'amour at the Paris Olympics. It was her first live performance in years, and the moment carried extra weight because doctors had once left her unsure whether she would ever sing publicly again. Dion revealed in December 2022 that she had stiff person syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes severe muscle stiffness and painful spasms. The condition can affect walking posture, breathing, and the vocal control she had spent a lifetime mastering. She canceled the remaining dates of her Courage World Tour and stepped away from the stage to focus on treatment and rehabilitation. Can one triumphant performance hide how difficult the illness remains every day? Her 2024 documentary, I Am Céline Dion, showed the private reality behind the public image. Therapy, medication, physical training, and unpredictable muscle problems had become part of her routine. She spoke openly about losing control of the body and voice that once seemed effortless while still refusing to give up on performing. The Olympic appearance proved that Dion could still reach an audience, but it did not mean the disease had disappeared. Stiff person syndrome is progressive, and treatment focuses on managing symptoms rather than providing a cure. Her schedule remains far more limited than before, and every return requires careful preparation. Céline Dion's future on stage remains uncertain. The illness has already taken away touring daily independence and the freedom to sing whenever she chooses. Her comeback in Paris was not a full recovery. It was one hard-won night. Morten Harket. The future of a-ha changed in June 2025 when Morten Harket revealed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. For millions of listeners, Harket was the soaring voice behind Take On Me the Sun Always Shines on TV and the James Bond theme, The Living Daylights. Now the same voice had become one of the areas most affected by his illness. Harket had kept the diagnosis private while receiving treatment. In June and December 2024, surgeons implanted electrodes on both sides of his brain as part of deep brain stimulation. The procedures reduced many of his physical symptoms, but they could not restore complete control. Medication also helped, although balancing its benefits against side effects became an ongoing problem. What happens when a singer can no longer trust the voice that made him famous? Harket admitted that he did not currently feel like singing and was uncertain whether he could express himself properly through music. He had been working on new songs, but he could not promise they would ever be completed or released. His concern was no longer reaching the highest notes. It was whether his voice could still communicate anything honestly. Parkinson's is progressive and has no cure. Surgery and medication may control symptoms, but they cannot guarantee that Harket will perform again. Future a-ha activities now depend heavily on his condition. Harket has asked fans not to spend their energy worrying about him, saying he is receiving good care. Still, The diagnosis has placed one of pop music's most recognizable voices in an uncertain position. The songs remain unchanged. The man who sang them is now learning what his body will still allow. Billy Joel. 17 scheduled concerts disappeared from Billy Joel's calendar in May 2025. The singer behind Piano Man, Uptown Girl, and We Didn't Start the Fire announced that doctors had diagnosed him with normal pressure hydrocephalus, forcing him to stop performing and begin physical therapy. The condition involves an abnormal buildup of fluid inside the brain. In Joel's case, recent concerts had worsened problems with balance, hearing, and vision. He later described the sensation as feeling as though he were standing on a moving boat. After decades of touring, even walking safely had become uncertain. Could Billy Joel ever handle a full concert again when simply keeping his balance had become difficult? Doctors instructed him to cancel every remaining show, including dates extending into 2026. The decision ended a major touring schedule and raised concern because Joel had already fallen during a performance earlier that year. He stepped away from regular public appearances and concentrated on rehabilitation with help from his family. Joel later said that the diagnosis sounded worse than he physically felt. He remained mentally engaged, continued discussing music, and did not completely rule out future creative work. In January 2026, he surprised an audience by briefly returning to the stage with the support of a cane. It was not a full comeback, but it showed that treatment had produced some progress. By March 2026, his daughter Alexa Ray Joel said he was doing well and taking recovery seriously. Still, his concert future remains unresolved. The illness has already taken away touring, affected his movement, and forced one of America's most dependable live performers to accept that the stage can no longer be taken for granted. John Driscoll Hopkins. John Driscoll Hopkins first noticed that his hands could no longer move across the guitar as quickly as before. His legs felt stiff, his balance became less dependable, and certain words required more effort. After months of testing, doctors diagnosed the Zac Brown Band musician with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or ALS, in December 2021. ALS gradually destroys the nerve cells that control voluntary muscles. For a singer and multi-instrumentalist, the threat was immediate. The disease could eventually take away his ability to play, speak, swallow, and breathe without assistance. Hopkins publicly revealed the diagnosis in 2022, acknowledging that no one could tell him exactly how quickly it would progress. How long can a musician remain on stage when his own muscles are slowly turning against him? Hopkins chose not to disappear. Although his movements and speech have slowed, he continued touring with the Zac Brown Band and performing whenever his condition allowed. He has admitted that singing now demands more concentration, but leaving music completely would mean surrendering an essential part of his identity. Together with his wife Jennifer, he created Hop on a Cure, a foundation raising money for ALS research. The organization has funded scientific grants while giving Hopkins a purpose beyond managing his own symptoms. He also released personal music including I Love You Forever, written with his family and uncertain future in mind. By early 2026, Hopkins was still appearing with the band. That continuation should not be mistaken for recovery. ALS remains progressive and incurable. Every concert now carries the knowledge that his voice, hands, or mobility may not remain reliable forever. Aaron Lazar. The first thing ALS threatened to take from Aaron Lazar was the physical control his career depended on. The Broadway actor had built his reputation through a powerful voice and demanding roles in Les Miserables, The Light in the Piazza, A Little Night Music, and Dear Evan Hansen. Then weakness in his muscles began changing how he moved. Doctors diagnosed Lazar with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis around 2022. He kept the news private for more than a year, even from his two sons, telling them only that he had a problem with his nerves. As his legs weakened, and he sometimes needed a wheelchair, hiding the condition became impossible. He publicly revealed the diagnosis in January 2024. How does a stage performer face a disease that can eventually silence both his body and voice? ALS gradually destroys the nerve cells controlling voluntary muscles. There is currently no cure, and progression can lead to loss of movement, speech, swallowing, and independent breathing. Lazar understood the prognosis but refused to let fear control whatever time remained. He created the impossible dream, combining personal storytelling with the song that had followed him since his early theater career. The project expanded into an album featuring Sting, Josh Groban, Kristen Chenoweth, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and dozens of other performers. It later received a Grammy nomination and raised support for ALS organizations. Lazar has continued acting, speaking publicly, hosting a podcast, and participating in research projects. His optimism does not erase the seriousness of the disease. His legs have weakened, his independence has changed, and the future remains uncertain. But instead of quietly leaving the stage, Aaron Lazar has turned his diagnosis into the most personal performance of his career. Billy Connolly. A surgeon who recognized Billy Connolly in a hotel lobby noticed something unusual in the comedian's walk and urged him to see a doctor. The warning proved important. In 2013, Connolly learned that he had Parkinson's disease the same week he was also diagnosed with prostate cancer. The cancer was treated successfully, but Parkinson's continued advancing. Tremors, stiffness, slower speech, and worsening balance gradually made live performance more difficult. Connolly eventually retired from stand-up, ending a career built on pacing across the stage, changing voices, and turning long stories into unpredictable comedy. How does a comedian adjust when the body can no longer follow the timing in his mind? Connolly has spoken honestly about serious falls and the growing effort required simply to walk. He often uses a cane, has less energy, and depends more heavily on his wife, Pamela Stevenson, and those around him. Friends said in late 2025 that his health was no longer as strong, although he still sent messages and retained the humor that made him famous. Leaving stand-up did not end his creative life. Connolly continued appearing in travel programs, writing books, and producing drawings and paintings. Art gave him a way to work without the physical demands of touring, while interviews allowed him to discuss illness without pretending to be fearless. Parkinson's has steadily reduced Billy Connolly's mobility and independence, and there is no cure. Yet he has resisted becoming only a story about disease. The Estee. Alan Alda. In Netflix's The Four Seasons, Alan Alda appeared as an elderly man living with Parkinson's disease. The role required no attempt to hide the trembling hands or slower movements that have become part of his real life. Decades after playing Hawkeye Pierce on MASH, Alda was still acting but under very different physical conditions. Doctors diagnosed him with Parkinson's in 2015. He kept it private until 2018, when visible symptoms made him concerned that tabloids would tell the story inaccurately. Rather than allow rumors to take control, he announced the diagnosis himself and explained that he intended to remain active. The disease has progressed. Dressing, typing, taking medication, and completing ordinary household tasks can require several attempts and far more time than before. Alda has said that managing the condition has become almost a full-time job. He also lives with face blindness, making it difficult to recognize people outside familiar settings. How long can an actor keep working when his body no longer responds as quickly as his mind? Alda has continued recording his Clear Plus Vivid podcast, supporting science communication writing, and accepting carefully selected acting work. His wife Arlene helps with tasks his hands can no longer manage easily. Their marriage has remained one of the strongest sources of stability in his life. Parkinson's is progressive and has no cure. Alda's movements have slowed and his independence requires constant adjustment. Yet he refuses to present himself as defeated. Humor remains his way of handling a disease that changes the rules almost every day.